Hey friends, Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. This is Huck TV. Huck is the boss. Huck L. Berry is the executive producer. And that is the magnificent Huck. Huck, what are you doing? Are you sleeping on the job? Huck is a big, fluffy, warm, cozy little bear now. Today it got up to 12 degrees in Montana. It was a little cool. Anyhow, Huck is going to be around for a while. In the meantime, I've got to clue you in on the biggest trip I'll be taking this year, 2025 Caribbean cruise. And it's going to be a Bigfoot cruise. We're going to be going to the Bahamas, St. Thomas, St. Martin, and I'm going to be with Dr. Mariah Mayor, Ryan Golombeski, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And the four of us are going to entertain you on the ship. There's some of the information. And it's Gather Up. Gather Up is one word. Gather Up Event Management. Go to it. Or just say the Bigfoot Caribbean Cruise and it'll take you there. It will be a time of your life. And please check it out. All right. Now, I want you to be patient with me on this one. Well, why do you say that, Dave? Because I'm going to set this up for you. This whole first 5 minutes is a setup for the rest of the show. And it needs to be done. Now, the first is a news article I'm going to read to you. July 18th, 1921. St. Louis, Missouri. Miss Rose Gray, 35, a nurse, died of fright when she found herself beyond her depth while swimming in the Mississippi River near here late yesterday. Witnesses say Miss Gray's body was never submerged, but floated downstream on the surface of the water. A physician who worked vainly for 45 minutes to awaken in the spark of life in Miss Gray's body declared that her lungs contained but very little water, and that it is his belief the nurse had died of fright when she realized her danger. Miss Gray, whose parents live in Belleville, Illinois, made her home with friends here. She served 2 years in France with the Red Cross. Dying of fright. Remember the number of people I've told you before in water that have died and they couldn't determine the cause of death? I thought that was an interesting angle. Dying of fright. I don't think that that's a physical thing you can die from. Now, why did I bring that up? One of the villagers, sent this article that I'm going to read to you just the other day. And this is weird, folks. This article is about the exact area in Montana that the stories are about today. Pretty weird. I saw it and I thought, there's no way this guy knew what I was going to write about or talk about. But the dateline on this is December 6, 1917. Title is, and this is in the Silver State Post, Does Unknown Terror Haunt Ovando Backwoods? Ovando is a very small city, just kind of northeast of Missoula, south of a little town called Seeley Lake, kind of southeast from Flathead Lake. It's an area that has a lot of game, a lot of big elk. Coroner's verdict is died of fright and exhaustion in the case of Lou Matson, found dead in snowy fastness of Clearwater. There are not many better hunters of the Blackfoot backwoods than Lou Matson. A few men can boast of hardier strength or more sturdy courage than the strapping 20-year-old Comet miner. When Matson went swinging out of Ovando Thursday along the snowy trail leading to the virgin woods of Clearwater, his friends would have laughed at any hint at danger. Who was any better in the hills than he? Who was any braver in a pinch? And was he not armed for any type of big beast in the country? A rifle he carried will knock a bear down at 100 yards and stop a leaping panther midair. But in the snowy stillness of the forest, Matson met something for which he was not prepared. Something not susceptible to high-powered rifles, leaving no track or sign, and terrible beyond facing. What it was, no one will ever know, for when his friends found Matson, the young woodsman was lying face down in the snow at the end of a trail left by his floundering feet, dead. Upon the frozen body, the searchers could find no mark whatever, not even as much as a bruise. And on the smooth snow about the body were no other tracks than Matson's own. Paragraph starts, terror written on face. But when they turned the corpse over, they found stark terror written across the face in a horrible grimace. Matson had dropped dead in the trail as he spent his last ounce of strength in flight from or battle with something which had frightened him into mad panic. Dead from fright and exhaustion was the verdict of the coroner's jury, which held an inquest into Matson's body in Ovando Sunday. But that verdict does not explain the case. Was frightened Matson to death? Is there a thing skulking in Clearwater backwoods which can turn the heart of a husky woodsman, crack shot, and skilled hunter? Is there an Ambrose Pierce sort of terror there against which bullets are useless and which can kill without marking its victim or leaving a track in the snow? Matson's friends did their best to find out. They followed the hunter's trail far back into the woods without finding a trace of any mysterious something which frightened him into running madly until dead from exhaustion. Matson and 4 other men went to Ovando from the Comet Mine, where all were working to go hunting on Thanksgiving Day. But the 4 companions decided not to go. Matson struck out alone. Just one man, B.C. Young, saw him on the trail. That was at about 10 o'clock Thursday morning. Matson was 8 miles from Ovando. When the hunter did not appear at nightfall, his friends became worried Friday. Walter Hess, William Busack, and another man went in search of him. They found his frozen body on the trail. An inquest was held Sunday, and afterwards the boy's father took the body to Comet for burial. The father and one brother are the only relatives. This made me think. Remember when I did the reviews of Skinwalker Ranch? Remember that. And remember I talked to you about hitchhikers. Hitchhikers were entities that followed you from one location to another. They followed one person back to their home in the East Coast outside of Washington, D.C., near Maryland. And their family members were scared to death because of what came into the house. Skinwalkers. I have no idea. That's one person's claim. I don't know. But they saw all kinds of entities. Well, if there's no tracks in the snow, what happened here? Ovando. I know the area very well. Been through it many times. And this next story seriously broke my heart. Happened this last summer. I'm sorry. It seems like it happened last summer. It happened in 2021. It just seems like yesterday to me because it had such an impact on my life. Headlines: new details about grizzly bear attack that killed a woman. Wildlife officials and residents of the Blackfoot Valley community are working together to wrap up details of last month's deadly attack of a grizzly bear on a woman in Ovando. Happened in July 2021. The July 6th attack killed 65-year-old Leah Davis Locan of Chico, California. The bear entered Ovando that morning and came to an area near the post office at about 3 a.m. where the victim was sleeping in a tent. Another couple in her party were sleeping in a tent nearby. The bear woke the campers but then ran away. The 3 campers removed food from their tents, secured it, and went back to bed. A video camera at a business less than a block away recorded the bear in the vicinity of about 3:15 a.m. At 3:30 a.m., the 2 people in the tent adjacent to the victim were awakened by sounds of the attack. They got out of the tent, sprayed the bear with bear spray, and the bear pulled the victim from the tent during the fatal attack. Here's what happened. The people were on a cross-country bicycle trip. No race, just a trip cross-country on a bike. They stopped in Ovando to spend the night. They put up a tent, and they kept food in their tent. Huge, huge, deadly mistake. Well, the bear came around, smelling the food. Bears have a nose like no tomorrow. And so the people said, well, we better get the food out of the tent. But the odor is still in the tent. And that's why the bear came back. Wildlife officials and residents of the community are working together to wrap up these details. All the information from the investigation will be sent to a board of review. A group of wildlife staff from federal and state agencies assembled to look into the details of the human bear attack and record them in a final report. Fish and Wildlife Director Hank Warsich said in a news release the local Blackfoot community came together from the first moments of this incident to do all it could to help. This is a tight-knit group of people with a long history of working together. Powell County Sheriff's Office received a report July 9th from a resident who came home and found her door ripped off and large claw marks were present. A short time later, a male grizzly bear was shot and killed in the area. Samples were taken from the bear and sent to a testing facility where officials confirmed it was the bear that killed Locan. DNA samples from the bear, saliva at the scene, and samples from 2 chicken coops that were raided all went towards the ID. So they got the bear. The bear had no history of conflicts, but was likely drawn to the town for food. It was a 4-year-old bear that was in good health. Ovando sits in the upper Blackfoot Valley, in an area with a long history of grizzly bears and cooperative efforts between landowners, wildlife, and agency officials. Grizzly bears are common in the Blackfoot Valley, but events that result in human injury or death are rare. The only other fatal injury of a black bear in the area was 50 years ago, and it was an elk hunter. Grizzly bear distribution in the area has continued to expand through the years. It is legal for people to kill bears in self-defense or in the defense of others. If it is reported within 5 days, it must be reported within 5 days to a federal or state agency. However, killing or wounding a bear for any other reason is not allowed. And here's the rules that they give for being in bear country. Be aware of your surroundings. Look for bear sign. Read signs at trailhead and stay on trails. Be especially careful around creeks and in areas of dense brush. Carry bear spray, know how to use it, and be prepared to deploy it immediately. Travel in groups whenever possible. Make casual noise, which can alert bears to your presence. Stay away from animal carcasses, which can attract bears. Follow food storage orders from applicable land management agencies. If you encounter a bear, never approach it. Back away slowly and leave the area. Very sad. Why did I read you all that? This is Ovando. And the stories I'm going to tell you about right now are Ovando. This is a very unusual area. It's absolutely stunningly gorgeous. They've got big meadows, big hills, mountains, lots of wildlife, which is probably why the grizzly are there. Lots of grizzly bear. You would have to be completely... I mean, first of all, I would never, ever camp in a tent in Ovando or anywhere out there. That's just me. But if I did, there's no way in heck Dave would sleep in that tent without a big gun. Because you can see what happened. Now, the first story I'm going to tell you about is about a man named Paul Prast. There was no age in the story. He went missing November 2nd, 1942 at the headwaters of Arastra Creek, just northeast of Ovando, not far. He was a World War I veteran, got seriously wounded in the legs, and everybody knew he doesn't move very well. But he grew up in Ovando, and he hunted the area his entire life. He knew the mountains per the sheriff like you know your own neighborhood. In the articles that supported this, his friends, family, and the sheriff said there's no way he got lost. So during the week of November 1st, 1942, Paul and a friend named Hal Haynes established an elk hunting camp at the headwaters of Arastra Creek. This area, lots of bears, lots of wildlife, lots of elk, lots of deer. And in 1942, there was probably way more than there is now. Well, he establishes the camp with Hal, and everyone knew that Hal had to leave for 4 days because of business, but Paul was going to stay up there and hunt and wait for Hal to come back. Well, on November 6th, Hal came back and found the camp empty, and from what he could tell, nobody had been there for a couple days. Hal searched the area for several hours and determined Paul hadn't been in camp, and his rifle was missing, so he thought he probably went hunting. But what concerned him was, it was obvious that he hadn't been there in a couple days. Hal had a ranch nearby. That's how he and Paul knew each other. They both had ranches nearby. And he went to his ranch, and then he went to summon a sheriff. Sheriff Volatin knew Paul and knew Hal. And let me explain this. This isn't unusual up here. People who own ranches have certain rights. Namely, you can't come onto a ranch property and hunt unless you have permission from the rancher. And a lot of times the fish and game people get to know the ranchers and actually have their phone numbers on their cell phone. So if somebody's seen on that ranch, they'll call the rancher and say, does this person have permission to be on it? Now in those days, everybody knew each other. They had to. For instances like this. Well, Volatin returned to the camp, the sheriff, after Hal got a hold of him. And several feet of snow had fallen right around their camp. Huck's scratching. The men determined that Paul's clothes, yes, tell them while you're here. The clothes that he should have been wearing were gone. A minor amount of ammunition was gone. The majority was still in camp. And he obviously had gone with his rifle. He hadn't taken his big coat, so nobody thought he was going to go very far at all. They theorized that he just went for a short hike, looking for some game. The sheriff left, made a notice in Ovando that he needed assistance, and dozens of residents came to the camp the next day and helped search. And in fact, the residents, all knowing Paul, committed to searching for weeks. And the search did go off and on for a month. Now remember, when you live for your ranch, your farm, your game, when something derails you and takes you away from your main occupation, that really says that these people cared about each other. Well, one of the main search organizers besides the sheriff was the local game warden, a guy named Harry Morgan. And he ran the searches when the sheriff wasn't around. On December 6th, over a month after Paul disappeared, Morgan said there were no hunters in the area where Paul was hunting. So the theory that maybe Paul got shot and killed by accident He said, didn't happen. There was nobody up there. They knew everyone who was coming up, and everyone owned ranches in that area and knew nobody was up there. Their theory, according to Morgan, was that Paul must have gone out a short ways, gotten hurt somehow, and was stranded out there. But they didn't figure out where he was at. They figured that they had searched every possible area around the camp within 2 miles. Well, after a month, it started to snow real hard, started to rain, and they gave up the search. Nothing happened on the case until August 1953, when a sheep herder in Ovando saw a body in a meadow and contacted Sheriff Alton. The body was at 8,000 feet in the exact area that was the center of all of this search. Paul had left his cap and his coat inside their camp. He didn't take it, so you know he wasn't going far. The sheriff said that the search and rescue team had gone through this area on skis and snowshoes multiple times and didn't see anything. They didn't see anything unusual. The local coroner never released a cause of death. It was in an area where it was previously searched. It's in a cluster zone that we've established. It was very, very near the headwaters of Arastra Creek. And he was in a subgroup of people who are missing by a large margin, elk hunters. Hey, there's people watching. Don't bark. Don't bark. What are you doing? She wants attention from Dad. That's what she does. And that was a bark saying, hey, Dad, would you please pay attention to me? I don't know who you're talking to in that little black box, but it's not as important as I am. No. She's selfish. All right. That's case number 1. Now, here, this is actually the map, part of the map with the Montana book. So this is Ovando. Now, the lady that got killed was staying in Ovando. Paul Prast was staying right here. This is his hunting camp. We're going to talk about these 2 cases right here. This is the center of a cluster zone. Now, remember the cases I read to you earlier. A person who died of fright. I don't know what to think of it, folks. But the next case involves a man named Herman Spieker. Yeah, like Speaker. 86 years old. Went missing October 2nd, 1953. He was German. Missing 10 miles west of Lincoln, Montana. Interesting story about Lincoln, Montana. You ever get a chance to go through it? First of all, they have a couple really good restaurants, but one of them is especially really good. And we had been told, hey, you got to stop by this place if you're ever in Lincoln. I don't remember the name of it now. So we stopped by for lunch. And we go in and we're sitting around. I always like to look at the walls. And I noticed that there's things on the wall about the Unabomber. Yeah, Ted Kaczynski. There's drinks named after him. Food named after him. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I remember that Kaczynski had his cabin in Lincoln, Montana, where he was holed up. And a good friend of mine, yes, John D'Souza, the FBI agent, was one of the primary agents on that case. Regarding Ted Kaczynski. Small world, isn't it? So anyhow, we stopped in Lincoln, and we were headed towards Ovando and Seeley Lake. But that was kind of a weird day when we stumbled into Kaczynski's town. Well, Herman was a longtime rancher in that community. Again, about 10 miles away from Lincoln, living west towards Ovando. He had his property backed up to some of the oldest forests in Montana. Again, 86 years old. And what he did is every summer he went to his cabin, a little shacky kind of place, to watch his cattle. Family always tried to pull him away, said, no, this is what I live for. I'm going to go here every summer. You got to respect that. Well, people always stop by to check on him. On October 1st, a friend stopped by to say hello to Herman, make sure he's okay. They said he was in good health, happy, tending his cattle. And he talked about a crippled cow that he was watching every other day. His friend left. Well, the next day, people knew that Herman was going to go out into the woods and check on that crippled cow. Friends, do you know how many cases I've told and written about where somebody disappears going out to check on livestock? It's a lot. Well, Herman left the morning of the 2nd to go check on that crippled cow. 6 p.m. that night, Herman's son, Neil, stopped by the ranch to check on his dad, and he couldn't locate him. Family members frequently stopped by, so it wasn't unusual. There was no sign of anything wrong in the little cabin. It was just like how somebody would have left it. His son said it appeared that Herman ate his breakfast and was cleaning his utensils, and he left. He walked around, checked the area, called for his dad, nothing, and he left to go get the sheriff for assistance. Family came back, and the only thing that was missing from the cabin that they could determine was the clothes that Herman would have been wearing. Well, before the sheriff got out there, he made a call from searchers from the community. And late that night, he got confirmation that 100 searchers, 25 equestrians, other ranchers would be on horseback. He requested a helicopter from Missoula. He got Deer Lodge County Search and Rescue to come. And they did underwater search of the Blackfoot River, just in case Herman fell in there. On October 4th, bloodhounds were brought up to the cabin, and it was stated that they only could pick up a scent intermittently. Search continued off and on for 2 months. That's bizarre, folks. I'm sorry. I mean, that's real commitment. You just don't see that these days. The disappearance happened in the Blackfoot Valley. There's a prominent Native American presence there. The canines couldn't find a scent that led to the body. Key point. The Blackfoot River, real close to the property, water. He spent decades living at the ranch. Nobody believed he got lost. Not possible. So the Missoula helicopter came out for 2 days, search for him. Never found him. Canines didn't find him. And 100 searchers over 2 months didn't find him. Now, Paul Prast disappeared November 2nd, 1942. Herman disappeared October 2nd, 1953. It's about 11 years. Herman was never found. The question has to be asked, how far could an 86-year-old rancher wander? And why would he wander? Everybody said he didn't have dementia, he was sharp, he knew what he was doing, he knew what his job was. So what happened here? And then we go back to that story about that young man dying of fright. About 10 miles from where Herman disappeared. Yeah. Now the next story is one of the most bizarre ones I've ever written. So talk to you about Paul. Just talked about Herman. Now we're going to talk about a man named Sam Adams. Adams disappeared south of Ovando. And when you look south of Ovando, there's a couple of big mountains right in here. Very pretty. But this area where mile-wise, it's about 10 miles from Ovando to here, about 10 miles to Spieker. So in a 10-mile radius of Ovando, these three people disappeared. But this mountain range is quite different than this one up here. Sam Adams, 39 years old, prime health, missing October 27, 1958, 5 years after Herman. He disappeared in what was called the Chamberlain Mountains, about 20 miles southeast of Seeley Lake. I should say something about Seeley Lake. Seeley Lake is sort of northwest of Ovando. It's a lake, real pretty, cute town, a couple really good restaurants. Seeley Lake. Well, Adams was hunting with two friends. Ed Hodges, who was 40 years old, and Calvin Trusty, who was 52. They all knew this area super well. They all knew the area because they lived it, worked it, ranched it. They were locals. They were all best friends. On October 27, 1958, the guys decided to split up, hunt, and come back to camp. Sam didn't come back to camp. Late that night, one of the men left to get the sheriff. The sheriff sent a deputy out to interview Sam's wife. The wife confirmed that he was armed with a rifle and a pistol, warm clothes, matches, and he carried food. Smart. At that time, in 1958, he was carrying everything he should have been. But, point of separation, three men got apart, something happened. When the community heard that Sam was missing, everybody stopped doing anything. And they all were committed to helping find Sam. Hundreds of people. The governor approved the National Guard to help. The Powell County Sheriff came out. And the Montana Fish and Game came out. And they all worked off grid patterns from the point Sam was last seen. November 13th, 2 weeks into the search, they had nothing. Weather continued to get colder, wet, and windy. And the disappearance hurt Ed and Calvin a lot. And they told the press that it haunted them every day, that they couldn't find their buddy. And even after the 2 weeks of the search, Calvin and Ed got together every weekend and went back out and looked. Every weekend. And they did that until it got really bad in December, January, and February. January and February up here just super cold. But starting in March, April, they went back out looking every weekend. July 12th, 1959. The efforts of Ed and Calvin paid dividends. They found an area where Sam's rifle was found broken into 3 pieces. What? I've never heard of that. They also located Sam's wallet, shoes, socks, some tattered clothing. They found some bear sign in the area. They found some human bones and some half-ingested clothing. I'm not quite sure what that meant. And they said that all of that evidence was strewn in a 50-foot radius. Initially, the sheriff and the local Fish and Game went in and looked at the scene. They were so baffled by what they saw that they asked for a special investigative team from the state to come in and look at it. If they did that, folks, this was no cut and dry, oh yeah, this, and this happened. This was unusual. After a couple months, the state came out with a theory on what happened. They said that Sam was out hunting elk, and he must have ran into a grizzly bear and had to shoot it. And he didn't kill it, he wounded it. This is all theory now. And he used all but 2 of his bullets in an attempt to kill it. They said that he apparently crawled alongside of a big log and tried to light a fire to keep warm. And then they said that he removed his bootlaces to be used as tourniquets. Let me explain this. There's no evidence he used any bootlaces as tourniquets. There was no bootlaces found. They found his boots with no laces in them. But they're trying to get a theory going here. Lastly, it looks like he used his last 2 rounds to summon help. That's what they said. And then they said the bear reappeared and he used his rifle as a club because he didn't have any rounds. Okay, so stop. Let's say you are Sam and you're in the woods and a bear has come attacked you. I'm sorry, I'm not going to use my last 2 rounds to summon help, because everybody who knows anything about grizzly bear, the most dangerous thing in the world is a wounded grizzly bear. Those things have a memory like no tomorrow. I'm not kidding you. They are going to come back for you if they get a chance. If you don't get out of that area, they're coming for you. As this one did. Fish and Game authorities from the investigative team said Sam was eaten on the spot and some of him was taken back to the bear's den. And they said that because they didn't find any of them, per se. They found some human bones, but they didn't find the bulk of Sam. Now, when I was writing this story up in Missing 411 Montana, I talked to a lot of sportsmen up here. And they said, Dave, do you believe all that? No. I don't believe it. And neither did anybody that I told this story to. And they said, well, where's the remainder of Sam's body? Why didn't they bring a dog in and try to track it? And then the $1 million question that none of the investigative team wanted to answer, nor did they ever find, where's Sam's pistol? Oh yeah, that's right. He was armed with a pistol and a rifle. They tried to find the bootlaces, they didn't find them. Investigators who spent weeks out there trying to understand this found 2 scenes 200 yards apart. They didn't explain what the 2 scenes were for, My guess was Sam was attacked and maybe he was trying to find a way out of there. And then towards the end of one of the articles, they said that they found his socks and his belt. But why would they find those? And why weren't those consumed? And then the real kicker is, why didn't they find any bear scat with human flesh in it or human bones in it? Yeah, that's a biggie. I've written many articles very similar to this, and there are no clear-cut answers. I wrote an article about a man who was an expert at bears. In fact, he came to Montana and he worked on a bear team for a while. And then he was hunting up in the Yukon Territory, and he disappeared. And they found him. And all the articles said that he was attacked by a grizzly bear, eaten on scene, and died. And then a friend of mine up in the Yukon gave me the name of the Fish and Game officer that was the chief investigator there. And he said, Dave, I don't know what happened to that man. The story's in Missing 411 Western U.S. But he wasn't eaten by a grizzly, Dave. Oh, we found lots of scat, no human flesh in any of it. I'm not sure what happened. And I don't know how the press got that idea to print that, because it didn't come from me. Local news reports for local consumption. Sam Adams, 39 years old, missing October 27, 1958. I have no idea what happened to Sam. He obviously lost his life. But they also never said in any of those articles that they found bear tracks around that area as well. They said they found one scat pile. All very strange. So folks, Ovando, Montana, highly strange area. The man or the woman that forwarded me the article about dying of fright, that could have been Sam Adams. Think about it, right? Well, I thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate you watching. And I hope you like the longer format. Some people have complained, well, they're probably going to complain that I read you some articles. Don't read the articles. Well, I read them, so what? This is the kindness revolution. I'm going to be kind to everyone I see out there. I was at the store today and this really older lady was working as a clerk, and I said, how long have you been working here? Longer than you've been alive, sonny. She was probably in her late 80s. And I said, yes, ma'am. I said, well, you don't look like you could be that old. She picked her head up and looked at me and goes, you need thicker glasses. And then she laughed. But hopefully I made her day. Thanks for being here. Kindness Revolution. Be safe. Be kind. Paulides out.